All right, guys, whether you're a beginner in FL Studio and you know nothing about FL Studio, or you're intermediate and you can't figure out how to get to that next level, or you're advanced, you will learn something in this video. So today we're going to show you guys how to master in FL Studio. I realized, I was showing my plugin off, but wasn't showing you guys, comparisons of the full process of mastering. So we're going to go through the full process in this video. We're going to be mastering a trap track with a little vocal hook on it. And you guys can get the project files for free. Just go to busyworksbeats.com/FL Studio. So I will be, here's the, the caveat to this video. I will be pitching my product at the end to show you guys there's a dramatic difference between stock plugin mixing and mastering versus my plugin. That's the whole point. But you know what I'm going to do is show you guys how to master. All right. So no secrets held here. So here's the track. Firstly, we want to listen to the loudest portion of the track. This is because different things from crest factor to peak values to basically it's just you want to understand how much headroom you need. Headroom is basically how much room you need to start processing sound. Think of sound as like needing storage on a hard drive. If you have 0 gigabytes left, you can't put anything on your hard drive. But if you have 50 gigabytes, you could put, maybe a video game on your hard drive. So you need to leave space for processing because processing eats up that headroom. Okay. Not everything should be level matched. Okay. So here's this track. Now, firstly, we want to get the idea of what the character of the track is doing. So firstly, this track is just it's dynamic, it's punchy, it's bassy, and it's a more soft vocal. It's not like super aggressive. Oh, my cars keep running. And my bra keep running. So the first step, I usually add an EQ here. This is not to do any adjustments. It's just simply so that we can turn stuff up and turn stuff down later. Okay, frequency based or just overall. Lifestyle did it show me this furthest left thing here, this fader. You could turn your whole track up or down. So we're just using this as a volume knob, whether for the whole track or for individual frequencies. So nextly, I'm thinking, okay, harmonics. Harmonics are, when you sing and then you go like that screamo voice. That's creating harmonics through agitation. And so we could do the same thing to our songs by running these through saturators or through clipping. Now, clipping is one style of saturation that adds a squarified tone. Once you clip, it's hard to kind of change the waveform. But what you can do with saturation is do more of a sawtooth into a square wave. So it's more of a gradient. So what we're going to do here is load up the Fruity Wave Shaper. So this is called a transfer curve. And the reason I'm using this is because our song has specific frequencies. What we're going to do with the Fruity Wave Shaper is add more frequencies into the song. Now, these frequencies can accent the song, they could complement the song, they could be dissonant. It depends on how you use this transfer curve. In short, we're going to right click this node up in the top right and switch it to either single curve or single curve 2 or 3 for more underground type beats or songs. We're going to turn the mix level up. Now, R&B doesn't need a super amount of saturation because it's not an aggressive genre. Whereas, trap music does need a lot of saturation, okay? Or not all the time, but it usually uses a lot of saturation, especially on the bass. So let's turn up the curvature here. And there's a sweet spot. I'm going to exaggerate so you guys can hear, but you got to be really careful with too much saturation because once we start crunchifying that kick, we're going to lose a lot of things that we can do later. So let's turn this up. I'm going to exaggerate just so you guys can hear. So this is the fullness that we're adding to the beat. Now, let's say you do like this tone, but it's just too aggressive. What we first want to do is turn on oversampling. Oversampling, whenever you saturate, you want to use oversampling mode. We have this built in our plugin by default, but basically, oversampling removes frequencies that weren't meant to be added to the sound. So yes, we're adding frequencies to the sound, but it's called aliasing, where basically frequencies enter your track that aren't supposed to be there. And there can be a lot of them. So we're going to turn on oversampling to reduce that effect. So this is going to be on 4x. Okay. And then we're going to go to center. So there's no DC offset, meaning that you never see when your track kind of leans down or leans upward on the waveform. That's offset from the center. So we're going to turn this on as well. So that we have maximum headroom on both sides of our track. Both polarities. All right, so I like the fullness. I like what it does to the bass. Now, for this specific mix, I like it kind of only on the bass. I'm not sure I like it across the vocals though. So what we can do, I just thought of this, we can use the fruity. Now here's where it gets a little convoluted because now we're using sends and different things. So it's to consider this mastering. Usually mastering is done on one channel, but we're going to actually use another channel here called bass. Now what we're going to use is the plugin called Fruity. Man, it's been a minute since I used this. No, Frequency Splitter. And what we're going to do is turn off the output of the lows. Actually, let's solo the lows so we can hear the lows first. And I'm going to run them through the wave shaper so I can hear the crunch that I want. So I don't want the like the boxy crunch. I want more of that kind of crunch. So what we're going to do is lower the in the top left, you guys can read the frequency. We're going to lower the low mid frequency crossover point. We only want everything from about like 100 and below. We're trying to avoid the kick. Now this crossover is not really directly at 50 hertz. It's a gradient. So we're kind of going by ear here. So I say this is a sweet spot. Okay. So everything from this point down, I want to saturate it. So here's with, you know, Fruity Wave Shaper. Here's without it. Here's with it. Okay. It just blooms out that bass. All right. So now what we're going to do is go to our main track. Now, if you're doing this on the master channel, I'd recommend you guys do this on your mixer somewhere over here so that you can route stuff around. Because once it's on the master channel, that's the final channel. You can't do a parallel in the master. So anyway, we're going to go here. We're going to send it over. Actually, yeah, let's just do it the old fashioned way. We're going to send it over and turn down the volume. So this creates what's called a side chain. So it's an invisible signal being sent over to this bass category. And what we're going to do is take that Fruity Wave Shaper and drag the save preset as across to the bass channel. And then we're going to turn it off from the main channel for now. So now what we need to do in Frequency Splitter is right click the sends and we're going to choose bass. Okay, and then we're going to turn off the bass for the main output and then turn on the mid and the highs. Now the only caveat to this technique is that depending on the crossover points, you can get stuff that shouldn't be in the mix or phase issues. This is not a perfect system because of the way sound has to be filtered, okay? But this is a cleaner way for us to apply that saturation to just the bass. At least, let's see, because there could be latency issues. It's kind of hard to tell. To my ear, it sounds like it's throwing the bass, which means there's probably a latency issue here. So I'm changing the precision to see if we get less latency. It's hard to tell because it's such a low frequency. I don't even think this is on. Let's turn on. Okay, so it's not even on. Never mind. All right, so now with the linear phase on, it seems to be more lined up. Maybe it's just my illusion. But that will keep that in line, at least for this example. Okay, so now we can try out different wave curvatures. So again, the goal is to pull up the bass and harmonic content so that it can be heard across the mid section a little bit more. So let's try different curvatures here. I think on curve 1, we did single curve 2, if I'm not mistaken. Now on this Fruity Wave Shaper, we're gonna do single curve 3 and be a little more aggressive with the tone. And just try out different tones now that the bass is separated. See how that bass just fills out? So we don't have to worry about pushing the bass too hard because the frequencies are so low, they sound natural being kind of multiplied into the higher frequencies with those harmonics. Only up until this point does it get a little floppy because around that area it starts to match with the kick. Let's say here's the sweet spot for this curve. So now I'm just debating which curve I like. So we can hit Control and left click to solo. So this one's a little more mono compatible, right up the center. This one's a little more perceived as wide. Now we're getting into more sound design territory, but we're gonna add this Fruity Stereo Shaper. And the goal of this is to create a micro delay that's almost so fast that you can't even tell. So we're gonna use the phase. Delay creates an audible delay. I'll exaggerate so you guys can hear. So it's ding, 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 ding like that. So we're gonna use the phase. So just imagine it's doing that left right thing, but it's very fast. Okay, so phase, we're gonna use very, very small increments here. And what we're doing is we're widening out the bass in a very subtle way to where it doesn't feel like we're like adding a chorus plugin or something. So this is an exaggerated area. So let's pull this into about half or below. All right, so if I take off these plugins, you guys will hear a difference in the bass. Here's before. Here's after. I still think there's an audible delay, so let's pull this back in. I think just because the volume is higher, it seems like a delay, but really the bass was at that timing. It's just that now it's louder, we can perceive it more. So linear phase feels a little more aligned with the track. So now we're just gonna level this because everything can't be loud. So let's just turn this down. Okay, so now the bass is on its own thing, at least the sub bass. So far what we've done is we've added an EQ just for volume. We haven't really touched it yet. Then we frequency split the signal. Now let's add the Fruity Wave Shaper back to the entire signal to see if everything can benefit. Now, in this case, we need to move, because the bass is separated, I'm actually gonna move this processing over to the master channel, because now we need to use a direct, it needs to be on everything. And the only way it can be on everything is on the master channel, unless we do a subgroup, okay, which we could do technically as a subgroup. But now we're gonna use the master channel. So this looks kind of like an ajarred process, but we needed to do it this way because you can't do this frequency splitting technique on the master channel. All right, now it's added to the whole thing just to see if we get more vibe out of this track. So it's clearly too much saturation. Let's dial back the mix level. Because what happens with saturation is, let's say you saturate the bass and everything else is not saturated, it won't feel cohesive. So we're trying to add saturation on the bass to get it to push hard, but then we can blend it back in with a little more saturation on the group. So we're gonna add just a tiny bit here. Just enough to glue the track together. It's so subtle. Here's before. Just listen to the hollowness of the beat. Here's after. So the beat just feels a little more full, okay? Now we need to think about the width of the track. So now we have harmonics. We need to think about making the sound bigger and bigger. So in FL Studio, by default, the parametric EQ2 does not do mid-side EQ. So let's add a patcher. Where's patcher when you need it? Patcher, where art thou? So we're gonna add patcher because what we need to do is create a mid-side split. So what we need to do is add the plugin called, let's right click, add the plugin called Fruity Stereo Shaper. And we need to I believe we need to double click in here, open up the preset menu, go to mixing, go to mid A side splitter. Now by default, the default output is the mono. Okay, we need to right click, and whatever this number is here, the in and out difference, this is the difference between the left and the right here, which is the side. Okay, so that number is 2. So we need to right click and go to outputs, go to audio, go to send to. So now this is the side image. So it's not stereo, it's the side image, mid and side. So the top line is the mid, this little top yellow line, and the bottom area is the side. So what we're gonna do is add another plugin here called the parametric EQ2 so that we can see the side signal. We're gonna drag this cable here and then drag it to the output. So now we should be able to see signal, but you're like, okay, what happened to the signal? So by default, FL Studio does not show the side signal in parametric EQ2. You have to go to the settings and tell it to focus on the side. Now I forgot how to get there. So this is drop down. We're gonna go to monitor input and go to the side image. All right, guys, as you guys saw, my mid-side setup was crashing FL Studio with the parametric EQ2. I don't know why, so it doesn't work for some reason. So we're going to use the Fruity limiter on the side image. Okay, so this way we can double up. We can actually do what I was going to do anyway in one plugin. So basically, we're going to turn the ceiling up so there's no limiting happening. Even if your stuff is passing 0, it won't turn it down. So basically, again, this is the side image. So the side image is the difference between the left and the right ear. Okay, so if we turn this gain knob up, as long as we don't have compression on, we should be able to hear the side image increase. So this is what makes something sound wide. Now you can overly boost the side image, so we got to be careful not to overly boost it. But just boost it until it sounds good to you guys. There's no magical number. So we're going to boost it about 2 dB for this song, so it feels wider. Now we can do more than just boost. We can use saturation by turning this knob to the left. Now I'm not sure it will trigger the saturation because you have to push into the saturation with more gain. So let's turn this to the left just to see if we get more sizzle, which we get barely any saturation. So we would have to push heavily into this, and to be short about it, you have to turn the volume back down. So let's push into the saturation. Now this is adding a sizzle to the side, but now what we have to do is add another plugin to allow us to control the gain on the output, because we just turned the input gain up, there's no output. So we're going to turn the gain down on the next Fruity limiter. So for example, if we boosted in the top left, it tells me 11.9 dB. Let's say I only want 2 dB of gain, so I'm going to turn this down 9 dB. So I'm just using this as a volume knob, the second Fruity limiter here. Now what we can do is add on the compression area, we can actually do, now would I do this normally? Usually dynamics I like to keep centered or across the entire stereo image. Stereo is left, center, and right. So I'm trying to debate if I want to do dynamics on the sides. Let's just listen to the track. Now another thing you guys can do is try to compress the side. So this is where it gets a little convoluted if you don't understand mid-side stuff. So again, side is the difference between the left and the right ear. When you start compressing the side, we can make it sound even bigger. However, when you have something that sounds exactly the same in the left and the right ear, it collapses to the center. So the more compression you add, you would think that it just makes it sound bigger and bigger, but sometimes it actually makes it more small. So this is a subtle art of compressing it and just finding the sweet area where it doesn't overly compress. So let's turn the ratio to about 2:1. So mess with the knee curvature to be a little more flatlined, I'll say, with the compression. It's hard to see this. Okay, so that white line up top represents the compression. So again, I'm doing this by ear. Let's turn it down the threshold. See how if I exaggerate this, it collapses the stereo to the center. See? Because now there's too much similarity between the left and the right ear, so it just collapses it basically, and it turned it down as well. So this is how you can add dimensionality, is by compressing the side and just kind of finding that area where you're, if you think of sound as left, center, right, okay, side being the left and the right basically, and the difference between left and the right, but the perception of left and right, and middle being the dead center. What we're doing is creating an in-between area, okay, with this technique. So it feels like the vocal goes like this, like running, and it feels like it goes in like a V shape. So we're just gonna blend this in so it's not that aggressive. So it creates a little bit of this like fish gill type effect. It's very subtle for this. So now let's turn up the gain to make sure we're compensating. So very subtle type thing. So mastering is about these extreme concepts but dialed back. Okay. Now we have the the system set up mid-side. The question is, do we want any more processing on the mid? So let's do something that adds a little more. I think they have a transient shaper. It's been a minute since I used FL. So I think there's, transient processor. I'm not sure if this is paid or free, but we're gonna use this only on the mid signal, and we're gonna turn this on, the attack. Now there's another way to do this, but I'm using this because I just wanna focus on just the transient information. Now also keep in mind there's a split balance, so we want this to be 100% to the right so we can hear what it's doing. Now the goal is not to make the audio pointier, the goal is to actually make it more concave of a shape coming down. Okay, so what we're going to do is mess with the sustain more so than the transient. The transient is going to make it point up, and it has a certain time length to it where it's so small we're not going to be able to hear it. So really it's just making the audio pointier, but we don't need pointiness, we need curvature. So let's pull down the sustain. Now the thing is we can't control the sustain, the like release tail of it, so it's a little jittery. So let's see what this release thing does. I will say it's a little jittery. I would like it more if it was not as jittery. And then it looks like you can even saturate the sustain or the entire, I don't know what it's saturating. It's not very clear what it's saturating. I guess the entire signal, because it squares off the transient. We don't need that. Let's lower the split frequency down to where the kick lives, around 100 hertz for this beat. Now notice that it has a little more punch. The default 250. It's just not where our kick lives. Now if I pull this down to 150, 120, you can now feel that dynamic. So I'll leave it here. It's not perfect because it's not clear how to like dial that release in. So now let's blend it in with the split balance. So we're just listening to the transient and saying, okay, does it sound too pointy? Like where it goes running like that, or does it sound like it's normal? So that's what I'm dialing in here. I'm going to turn up the gain so you guys can hear. Right now it's like jumpy with that kick. It's like like that. So we got to blend that in. I think there's a decent spot there. Now normally I would add that over the entire track, but the drums are pretty much in the center anyway. So that's pretty much all we need to do as far as mid-side information. We could add a compressor to the middle, but again, that transient shaper is basically doing what a compressor would be doing anyway, which is shaping the dynamics. Now let's just turn stuff off and see if we're making it worse. So I think this is too wide. Let's turn down the gain. And then we'll just turn up the... So I need to set this up to where we have an EQ in here. So let's insert a plugin. Let's add parametric EQ2. We're going to use this as a volume knob. And we need both chains to go through, which it did. Okay, and then we're going to turn... it crashed again. I forgot that fast, guys. That parametric EQ2 in the new patcher on Mac, it just keeps crashing out. I don't know why. So we're going to use the Fruity limiter. And this way is actually a better plugin anyway, because we can shape both. We can shape the entire stereo image. So let's do Fruity limiter. And I can do the next step in the processing, as well as just turn the gain up. So let's turn the ceiling up. Let's turn the gain up. And here's where I'm going to add expansion. So let's go to compressor. And let's turn the ratio to the left. So this does volume increasing past the threshold. So we're going to turn up sustain to get rid of any jitter. And this is boosting the volume. So instead of a compressor turning down the volume, we're adding more curvature to the shape by boosting the transient up a little bit. So now it's like running. It throws the audio at you as opposed to turning it down. Now we just got to adjust the threshold so it's not so super obvious. And this is going to help your beats feel more open. Most people's beats sound so squashed because they have no transient, no upwardness. So this is a little aggressive. Let's dial back the ratio as a mix knob. Now it's a little jumpy, so let's figure out if it's this plugin here. Probably is. So instead of soloing the mono, I'm just going to bypass that signal flow for now and just go straight into the expander. I think the transient shaper just does something different with its time values. All right, so now we are clipping, so we need to go back to the gain, turn it down, and just okay. So we're sitting around 0 for this track. All right, so what do we have so far? We basically have an EQ going in, so we could gain stage with that. We have a frequency splitter separating the bass. We have a saturation on that bass using a Fruity Wave Shaper. We have a time stereo spread delay on the bass, so it's a little bit wider but very subtle. And then we have Fruity Wave Shaper creating saturation over the entire track. Moving into a patcher where we have mainly addressed the side image and we added saturation on the side. And what else did we do? And then we went into an expander for dynamics. So now we can start talking about clipping and, you know, getting that final area of the sound. Okay. So let's add the Fruity Soft Clipper. Now most people just slap a Fruity Soft Clipper on and call it a day. We're going to turn up the threshold here. And here's the tricky part. We need volume to go into the Fruity Soft Clipper. So the tricky part is this gain is an input gain, not an output gain from what I understand. So the tricky part is I think they have a gain plugin. Let me see if they have a simple gain plugin. That would be helpful here because we can't use the EQ. So let's use Fruity. I swore it was called Fruity Gain. Maybe it's called Fruity Balance or something like that. Fruity Balance. I haven't used this plugin in decades, but we need it for the volume knob. So we can only go up about 6 dB, which should be good enough. And again, we're only using this because the parametric EQ2 is broken in the patcher. So we're going to turn up the volume going into Fruity Soft Clipper. So we're not worried about hitting 0 because the Soft Clipper stops at 0 with the transfer curve. We're trying to push volume into it so that the waveforms change as they get pushed past the top portion here. And we're listening for the crunch of the kick mainly. Now we're getting that punch out of the mix. It's still a little muddy, but I'll show you guys how to clear up mud. Now the thing here is there's no mix level outside of just turning this mix level down. So we're gonna blend in the clipping. Most people just kind of leave it at full clip. Something about there is the sweet spot. Now, when you turn down the mix level, however, now the signal is going above 0. So what I'm going to do is add another Fruity limiter to add either another realm of saturation and compression, or just simply, yeah, that's the goal. So let's turn up the ceiling. Let's mess with the saturation. Our goal now is to see how much headroom we can buy using different tools like clipping and saturation. Basically squaring off the top of the sound so that we can turn everything back up. Now in FL, I'm not sure they have an upward compression tool. I'm gonna see about Fruity limiter, but I'm not sure it works the same as like traditional upward compressors. So now I'm saturating, I'm chopping off the pointiness, the triangularity of that kick and making it more squared off. Now this will change tone. So I think here's like the sweet spot where we're not losing the punch of the kick, but we're also not, you know, the kick sounds a little more full, I'll say. Now it's not wrong to pull it down here, but it's more of a desire, like a more of a boutique sound. To have that like Ripley trio type sound. So I say here is about the sweet spot to keep that dynamic. All right, now we're gonna go back and start adjusting some of the clarity in the song, but now we're just trying to push into 0. So let's add the new plugin called Emphasis, or I always mix these up. Is it Emphasis or Emphasizer? I think it's, no, see, I picked the wrong one. Okay, so the new one's called Emphasizer. It's just it's just the smaller version of Emphasis. And I'm gonna put soft clipping on, and then we're gonna boost into it. So my goal is, again, just to hit 0. Now we can push heavier into this. I say about 2 to 3 dB. Once you start pushing that far, it just sounds like a flat line. You're losing a lot of dynamic. So here's like a decent spot. So we're getting loud loudness out of it, but the thing is we're not getting clarity. And this is where mastering tools that are designed to sound really good shine, like the BusyWorks Beats AI Mastering 8, which we'll show you in Logic Pro, because I just realized we're using the mastering chain here. Actually, I probably could just turn that off as we listen back. Yeah, never mind, it won't be complicated to do it in FL. So if I turn these plugins off, I want you guys to listen to the mix. Sounds very thin and flat. Now let's start turning these mixes on. Plugins on me. Now you guys can feel that heavy boxiness that's been added. So now we're going to go back and start shaping the actual tone. But even if we EQ this stuff, it's not going to take away the harmonics of the sound. So it's just going to lower the harmonics. So in other words, I can add this EQ just before the emphasizer to cut down on some of that boxy 500 area, but it's still going to have all the frequencies. It's not removing the frequencies. So hopefully I'm making sense. So we're going to boost it so you guys can hear what I'm talking about, and then we're going to cut. So here we're going to boost it about 300. This is the beginning of the woofiness of the sound. It's a lot of blurriness, I'll say there, and then we're going to check 500. This is also where that kick sounds boxy. Usually where that saturation of the kick starts to sound plasticky and boxy. Now there's a lot of frequencies in the vocal that are important here. So if we just turn this down, it can make the track sound hollow. So this is where we have to understand that everything has a compromise when we start cutting and boosting. So we're going to cut very subtly here because we're not trying to get rid of the entire sound. We're just trying to lower the amount of harmonics in this specific area where it's dense. So 500 for this track. Again, you guys can actually make this to where if you add patcher, my patcher is not working properly, but you would make sure that this is on the mid signal for that kick to target just the kick. For now, we're just going to do it on the entire stereo track. Still a little woofy and boomy, so let's turn down the lower frequencies, just using a low shelf. We're going to do this by ear. I'll exaggerate so you guys can hear the difference. And then slowly pull it up. So we can cut clear 4 dB safely, I'd say, for this mix, without it feeling like it doesn't have any subs. It is a little thin with 4 dB, but at least we know that's our new range is from 0 to 4. Let's cut about 2 dB just to tighten up the mix a little bit. And now let's think about the EQ using brightness. So let's turn up the high shelf here. I like to just high shelf, just in general. I like broad high shelf because it feels like a tilt and a lean. So this will make the track feel a little more tall. And a lot of people are afraid to push the highs. So I've had, the SSL Fusion, for example, where I was boosting about 8 kilohertz, I was boosting 8 dB. So don't be afraid to push the highs because, even on analog gear, you can push the highs. Now, digital plugins are a little bit different in the way they react. But our plugin was built after analog modeling. So my point is, don't be afraid to push this higher. I know people tell you don't do more than 4 dB or 3 dB, but sometimes it's not enough. It just depends on the track. So that to me sounds pleasant. Now the mix sounds full, but again, when you hear this against the BusyWorks Beats AI Mastering 8, you're gonna be like, wow, there's so much more clarity. So there's so many minute details that go into a deeper master than this. A lot of it requires more plugins than you can even fit in these slots. So we got a full mix, or full, I'll say master. Again, here's without the master chain. This is just the frequency splitter with the bass. Here's the master. You know, some things we could dial back is just some of the crunch. So that's why we have that mix level here for the Fruity Soft Clipper. And I think we ran the saturation and the Fruity limiter here. So this is where you guys have to go back and just tweak things and just see what, you know, what difference it makes on the sound. Like here we get a louder sound, but we're losing the low end of that kick with the Fruity Soft Clipper turned all the way up. So somehow this is saying -6. So we got to fix whatever happened in this chain to where now it's pushing. Oh, okay. That's the high frequencies. Okay. So this emphasizer is pulling out more volume. Now it'd be cooler if we can see which frequencies it's pulling down. It's kind of hard to tell. So I think the only way I can do this, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure it's just turning down the highs and not the entire signal. So I'm going to add a filter. This is just utility filter. We're not doing this as the mix. And I want to see if we push into the emphasizer. Yeah, we can push about 5 dB without it even clipping. So now I'm debating if I want to do a multi-band clipping, but we can't because we're on the master channel. But as you guys can see, the higher frequencies can be pushed further into clipping than the lower frequencies. And I'm trying to think of a better way we could approach this. I guess there is no way we can do it on the master channel outside of adding a patcher, which could destroy the mix. Let me think for a second, guys. Let me think. All right, let's try a patcher approach. So what we're going to do is turn off the emphasizer and try patcher. Hopefully it doesn't crash. So my theory here is that if we push certain frequencies into that emphasizer, we should get different responses. So basically I'm going to create 3 emphasizers. And the only tricky part I could think of here is just the level matching. So I guess there is a level matching feature. So that would be good for this experiment. So anyway, let's right click, save preset as. So we're going to do this for the mid, lows, and the highs. Think of this almost like how people use multi-band compressors. I'm doing this in a similar way. Let's use the Fruity, where is it at? Fruity frequency splitter. Now the tricky part is setting up the sidechain in patcher is not the same thing as doing it in the mixer. So we're gonna have to right click and do send 1. So we're gonna get rid of the main output. That's the stereo output. So send 1 is gonna be our bass, I think by default. Send 2 is gonna go to emphasizer 2, and I'm gonna rename these so I know what is what. And again, you guys will get the project file so you don't have to set all this up. Let's call this mids, call this one highs. All right, so then output 3 as audio is going to be send 3. We're going to send that to the highs. So if I did this correctly, oh, I guess we can choose which number it is, but basically we're going to right click and select the proper sends that correlate with the cables I just created. And then we're going to turn off the inputs. All we need to really adjust before we even send the signal is where we're going to set the low frequencies. I'll just leave it on by default. And if it sounds bad, we'll just move that cutoff, what do you call this thing? Crossover point. So I'm using linear just to see if it sounds a little more smooth. I get a little more impact with that linear phase. All right, so we're not hearing, oh, the output's not linked. That's why. Okay. So the first thing I need to do is make sure I level match per each band, because if I don't level match and I push into these with the soft clipper, each thing can sound louder or quieter, and that will mess up my balance. So now I'm going to go to each band and push into the emphasizer. So let's start with the highs first. Now the highs, I should have pulled up my that EQ that I had. So I basically I got to set my own filter. I forgot where I set the frequency, so I think it was around here. So somewhere around like 2K and up. All right, so that's where the highs need to start inside of the frequency splitter. So let's make sure the crossover point is at around 2K, not 3K. All right, so now we're gonna push into the highs. Now we should just only hear a tonal difference. I don't really even hear a difference. Let's mess with the emphasis to see if that changes anything. I don't know, the highs are really hard to tell. It's almost impossible. Now the mids are a little more obvious. If you push them too hard, they sound squashed. So that's very obvious. And now let's try the bass. So let's see if this made a positive change. I'm not sure because it does sound a little plasticky. Yeah, to my ear, it just made it sound plasticky. So that would be a technique for this mix though. I think it's just simply the way the crossover filters work. Personally, I think that just kind of messes everything up. So that adds a little too much mud. But what we could do now that we have Patcher is, now that we have this separated, instead of these, we can bypass these plugins and just try different things per band. So in this case, let's say for the highs, I want to add more saturation. Let's add the fruity limiter. All right, so now we're kind of sound designing our way to more loudness and just doing little things to see if it adds. Okay, so where's our output here? Why are we getting no output? So I have Patcher on, we have the highs on. Wait, did I not bypass the signal? Okay, let's do this. Oh, my dumb self. No, we should get signal. Send 3, send 2. So I'm not understanding why we're not getting signal here. So let me figure this out. Let me pause the video real quick. Okay, so I thought a cable was turned on, but it was turned off. That's why. So now that we have this figured out, we're going to basically separate the high frequencies into the fruity limiter to see if we can get a little more detail out of the highs. This is called high detail. Let's saturate the highs a little bit more. Now this will sacrifice a little dynamic, but the goal is to create more high frequencies to fill out that area. Now the tricky part is level matching, so that's going to be the tricky part. So what I am going to do is run into the emphasizer, just turning off the gain inside of here, but keeping the level matching on. That way when I boost in here, actually that does nothing. Never mind. So never mind. We have to do this by ear, which is a little tricky. So now let's grab those other signals. Firstly, let's bypass all these to see if just filtering adds that bubbliness. So here's before. It just adds like a cloak over the sound just by the filter itself. Now it is almost unnoticeable for the average ear, but it is doing something. I just wanted to see if it was doing something that I thought it was doing. So let's disconnect all these cables here. We're gonna run send 3 through the fruity limiter and then see if we can get some. We can even add dynamic here using that expander. Now saturating too much can make a pointy sound more sustained and scrapey, so you got to be careful. Now remember, we don't have an output knob, so we're gonna have to use another fruity limiter or something with a volume knob like fruity balance, for example, to turn down the output. So we're gonna go in here, let's turn it back down. Now again, we have to do this in context of everything else. Let's to see if Patcher's doing anything. Here's before.
Running. All my cars keep on running.
If anything, it made it darker a little bit.
Running. And my bra keep on running.
There we go. So that brightened it up a little bit.
All my dog keep on running.
Now, I didn't mention the mid side, so I think we need another patcher. So this patcher is simply for getting the low mids and the high frequency separated. Now we need a patcher for the mid signal and the side signal, because now we need to control the mid side signal. So let's add this plugin called Fruity. So see how many plugins we have to pull up? It's like 30 plugins in, and we're not all the way at the sound here. Fruity Stereo Shaper. We're gonna click in here, go to the mixing, go to presets, go to mixing, go to mid A side splitter. So now we're listening to the mono mix. Now we could, tighten up some of the dynamics, for example, using a Fruity limiter. So this is, optional. Let's add a little compressor here.
All my cars keep on running. And my bra keep on running.
Personally, I like the expander sound
All my dog keep on running.
more than a compressor.
Running. All my cars keep on running.
Let's mess with the saturator, see if that adds any detail. I doubt it, because we already squarified the sound.
And my bra keep on running. All my dog keep on.
All right, so that's the mid signal. Now let's turn that off, and then we're gonna right click, go to audio, outputs audio, go to send to. It's the same number here, the in and out difference. It's gonna go to send to. And here we're gonna add a Fruity limiter. Now what we need actually is an EQ. So let's see if, hopefully this doesn't crash or fail. Let's do parametric EQ number 1. Drag this to the output. So now we're here in the side image. So now we're gonna use this to take out certain frequencies that are a little muddy on the side, like 200 Hertz. Usually a muddy area. Let's turn up the resonance here. Sweep around the 300. We just have to ask, does it add anything really to boost? And if the answer is no, then we're going to cut a little. Now I'm reading the values in the top left. You got to be careful here, because just that little move is 2 dB. So that could be a lot. 500 doesn't sound bad. We can boost it a little bit just to kind of compensate for some of the frequency loss. Then we can brighten up the side. The side is a safe area to brighten. Now again, we're hearing the sides in solo. And we don't have to cut the lows, but it helps the lows be more centered and mono compatible. It's not a rule, it's just technique. So let's hear it without the lows on the side. And then with the lows on the side. I'll exaggerate so you guys can hear what I'm targeting. So it's kind of loose, so let's turn it down. Now it does feel a little more clear, but now we're losing that kind of middle area. From this point, I would just push into a limiter. In this case, the emphasizer is a limiter / soft clipper.
All my cars keep on running.
It says we're taking out 6 dB. How is that possible?
Running. All my cars keep on running. And my bra keep on.
So I don't know if the meter is wrong, because it won't reset. So let's see if this is
Running. All my cars keep on running.
think the meter was reading wrong for a second there. So now I'm pushing until I feel like the song feels smaller. So here's that area where it gets a little it's a compromise of boxiness and loudness. I say here's a safe spot. So again, here's before the mastering chain for the most part. Here's after. And one thing we didn't address is upward compression. Let me see if we can get that going with the fruity limiter. It might not do what I think it's gonna do though. Let's just see. So basically we're gonna turn the ceiling up, go to compressor mode, turn the threshold down, and then mess with that ratio going up. I'm gonna mess with the attack and release here so it doesn't just pull up every single thing in the mix. So that adds a little more loudness for sure. It's hard to tell what it's grabbing onto because it's not a straightforward upward compressor. All right, so now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna print this. That way I can use the master channel to have everything. So let's print this track with these effects on it. All right, so as this prints, the next experiment is now I'm gonna show you guys the BusyWorks Beats AI Mastering 8 and then show you guys what it sounds like versus our whole stock process that took a lot of thought, a lot of time, a lot of patchers. I can't even, let's see how many plugins this took in total. It took one, well, technically we didn't use the parametric EQ2. Let's check that as well. It's the final thing here before we move on. So now we're just gonna check if we push the input volume, what happens. So once we push, 2 more dB, it just kind of loses all its shape. So we could push another dB, but it's losing some of its like pointiness. I say 1.2 dB. I'm going to print this also, so let's export this and just call it plus, was it 1.9 or whatever? I forgot the number that fast. 1.9 dB boost. All right, so let's print that. All right, so you guys can visually see the chain from the original song. What it looks like is very pointy and very open, more dark space. And then here's the mastered version, very full, very dense. All that space is kind of filled in. You could even zoom out and just visually see there's more density on the louder areas because of all those steps that we showed you guys. So now I'm going to turn off the mixing and mastering. We're going to mute the original channel, and then we're going to basically start doing a blind test. So let's hit Control L. Actually, we need one of the original files, which will. So anyway, let's hit Control L on these. Let's hit Control L on that one. So I'm going to call this one BusyWorks Beats AI Mastering 8, so I know what is what. And this one is the 1.2 dB boost, FL stock. And then we have this one, which is just FL stock mastering. All right, now we're gonna add a plugin called Hoffa For You Blind Test. It's completely free. And basically what it allows us to do is solo each channel and leave notes as we listen in what's called a blind test, meaning we don't know, we can shuffle these so that we don't know which is which. So what it does is basically just soloing each channel and shuffling them. So let's solo the BusyWorks Beats 8 channel. We should get a the default song unmastered. Now let's pull up the BusyWorks Beats AI Mastering version 8. I'm working on version 9. I told you guys I'm gonna keep trying to get better and better and better. But basically, here's how you do it. Highlight the area that is your loudest portion of your song, and then hit Auto Master. It will start setting the knobs for you. It will set the headroom. It will set all the dynamic controls for you on the back end. So here's our default sound. Now let's just test the default sound against the loudness of how we master these other tracks. So FL is definitely, we pushed it harder. Anyway, long story short, here's the beginning of the blind test. So again, we have the BusyWorks Beats AI Mastering 8, and all we did so far was just listen to the original channel and hit Auto Master. So let's do this from scratch just one more time. Let's click Presets, go to Initialize, hit Auto Master. All right, so this is just the default starting point. We can make this louder. As you guys can see, there's a loud knob, there's a turbo knob. We have inputs and outputs. I'll show you guys how to get this thing loud. Now what we're gonna do is compare this against the loudness of FL and then see how far we have to push the BusyWorks Beats AI Mastering 8. So here's FL stock. Very boomy, very centered around that kick. And let's try the 1.2 dB boost. Now again, the sacrifice is that the kick is now basically a square, and it sounds very just like the kick is dominating everything, and it's very dark sounding. Alright, so let's go to the BusyWorks Beats AI Mastering 8. Now the goal is, again, it starts off with a balance. You guys can always push this, so I'm going to show you guys how to push this further. We're going to start with the knobs on the front. So basically, I like to mess with the turbo knob. It adds fullness. And let's add the loud knob. Now this track we can push really aggressively because it's a trap track, so it has a little more area to push. Now we're going to go to the EQ, and I like to switch on and off the high pass filter. This basically can add a little bit of a sub emphasis. For this track, it just makes the kicks feel a little more dynamic. Let's pull back some of the blend levels here. And the other secret gain area is in the compression area. We have what's called the output of the compressor. We could turn this up to get more of a clean gain. So we're pushing, 8 dB out of the compressor, and now we can mess with all the other stuff. This is all based on you guys as a preference. We can make it more mono compatible, for example. Get out more clarity. Want a cleaner sound. Now we're gonna mess with the upward compression. So I think 35 is a sweet spot where it's not like overly aggressive on the side. And then we have an EQ where we can shape the tone. I added this EQ for you guys. We can make it even brighter, for example. Mess with the width knob. Now for more dynamic, we could turn up what's called the punch. to the same kind of level as the FL.
Run it,
Now FL is loud, but it's dark.
run it, run it, run it, run it, run it. All my cars keep on running, running, running.
There's a Busy Works beat to add mastering 8.
Running, and my bra keep on running, 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 running.
We could have mid focus to pull some of that vocal forward.
Running, 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 running. All my cars keep on running, 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 running. And my bra keep on running, running, running.
See how we can push this plugin without it falling apart? So here's the FL.
Running, 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 running. All my cars keep on running, 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 running. And my bra keep on running, running, running.
Pull back on some of the brightness a little bit.
Running, 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 running. All my cars keep on running, 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 running. And my bra keep on running, running, running.
All right, now let's see what the 1.2 dB boost in FL did.
Running,
See how it's just like, it just sounds like, you ever see those videos where the car like plays a kick and it just rattles the entire car? That's kind of how
running,
the mix turned into. It's not balanced anymore.
running, 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 running. All my cars keep on running, 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 running. And my bra keep on running, 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 running,
Here's a Busy Works beat to add mastering 8.
running, running, running,
I'm gonna tighten up some of the side image here.
running, running. All my cars keep on running, 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 running.
And we also have an expander in the dynamic area and a transient shaper you guys can mess with to get it a little more jumpy, I'll say.
Running, 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 running. All my cars keep on running, 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 running. And my bra keep on running, 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 running. Running, 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 running. All my cars keep on running, 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 running. And my bra keep on running, 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 running.
All right, so there's like an area where, you know, if we push the transient too hard, it just sounds like a transient song.
Running, 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 running.
So the blend knob and the mix knobs are how we pull back the compression here.
Running, 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 running. All my cars keep on running, 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 running. And my bra keep on running, 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 running. Running, 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 running. All my cars keep on running, 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 running.
So this plugin is it's customizable, but it's much easier to dial in my opinion.
Running,
And then we can mess with the side image or the mid EQ here with even tilt options.
running,
So we could turn up the sides, which I wouldn't do on this one. I'm just showing you guys.
running, running. And my cars keep on running, 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 running. And my bra keep on running, 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 running.
Kind of like that side approach, but let's see if it takes away from it. All right, let's keep going back and forth. Here's that FL stock.
Running, 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 running. All my cars keep on running, 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 running. And my bra keep on running, running, running,
Here's 1.2 dB FL stock.
running. All my dog keep on running, 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 running. From my log keep on.
Here's Busy Works beats AI mastering 8. It's clear, it's fuller. The whole image is there. get FL stock. Now switch it to the BusyWorks beats. Get really unique spreads. I just showed you guys how to make your track wider, louder, and have more punch. Okay, so you can definitely dial in the BusyWorks Beats AI Mastering 8, pardon me. So now let's do what's called a blind test. This should be very obvious, but if we go to blind test, we can turn off the mixer, and now we're gonna listen without any influence of meters or anything. And sorry guys, I had to splice this video into two different things. I had to splice them together. I had to cut the video into two pieces at the beginning of this because the audio buffer length was too low and it almost crashed my CPU. So that's why there was a cut in the video however long ago. Let me see how long we've been filming. 12 minutes ago, there was a cut in the video for that reason. All right, so now we're gonna do a blind test. We're gonna shuffle these and just see which one sounds better and leave notes. So I'm gonna wait for the drums and the vocals to sit in. I'm about to say hit. So I wrote some notes for each pass of the audio there. So this one, number 3, let's reveal the tracks. Okay, so number 3 is the FL Studio stock version 1. Let me loop the hook so we can hear it on the hook. This one I just put, it was dark. The bass was too boxy and aggressive. And then on 1.2 dB boost FL Studio, I put it was dark. It was a little bit louder than the other one, but it was boxy. What I say? Bass was too boxy, and I put too much bass bias in the dynamic. Even though it was dynamic, it was a dark dynamic. It just sounded very just low end and just nothing else. Okay, now the BusyWorks Beats AI Mastering 8. I said this one was clear, wide, the bass was clear, the image was full. It was a dynamic mix, but it wasn't overly dynamic to where it's focused only on the drums, and it wasn't biased towards the kick and the bass. All my cars keep on running. And my bra keep on running. All my dogs keep on running. It's like these other ones, you could barely hear the vocals. Running. All my cars keep on running. night and day difference, guys. This one's number one for me by a landslide. But I'm going to let you guys vote because, again, people think I'm biased in my own test. I mean, that, to me, it sounds objectively better on every level.
Run it, run it, run it, run it, run it.
So here's the FL stock.
Run it, run it, run it, run it, run it, run it.
Here's the Busy Works beats.
Run it, run it, run it, run it, run it, run it. On my dog keep.
Like night and day difference, guys. If you guys want to find this plugin, go to busyworksbeats.com/AI. Thank you guys for watching. It's a game from busyworksbeats.com. Share with a friend. Peace out, guys.